repeated now, except this time the spies are confident. The spies are confident. In fact, they have so much success, they convert Rahab, believer. And so that's where we enter into the story. Yep. The next generation. Yeah, so the people that died was everyone who was living above a certain age at that time, when they whinged and whined and complained and were too scared. That generation had to die. Their children are now grown up, and their children are now under Joshua. So those, you can imagine all those kids grew up under seeing Joshua as second in command to Moses for so many years. They've got a lot of respect for him. And when Moses dies, they say, "You lead us, we're happy to follow you." And so they're now loyal to Joshua. They've been taught correctly, and they go in with strong hearts to defeat these Canaanites who are big, and they see the land, and they want the land, and they believe in the promise of God. So then the spies are successful. And so we enter the story at this point where they're about to enter into the promised land, and they come across a problem. They need to get to the promised land across the Jordan River. So they have to cross a river with their whole army. And the chapter that we're going to talk about today is about the miraculous event that allowed them to cross the Jordan. Okay, so it's a very famous event. You've probably heard of it before. We'll try and take as many lessons as we can out of it. The main lesson that we're going to be thinking about today, the main theme that we'll try and extract some spiritual messages out of, is dealing with obstacles in your life. So these people have a promise from God that they're going to have the promised land. These people now believe in that promise. But now they have this thing in front of them which seems insurmountable. It's a problem. It's an issue for them. And for us, as we live through our lives, we have the same problem often. We hit into obstacles. We hit into problems that for us seem insurmountable or very difficult, and we don't know how to manage them. So what we're going to talk about today is how to manage these obstacles, or how to deal with some of the obstacles in your own life. And when we think about obstacles, they can come in many forms. So it could be a sin that I am struggling against, and it's repeated, and I can't clear myself from it. It could be relationship problems, or the desire for relationships. It could be friendship issues. It could be family issues. It could be financial issues. It could be risks that I take. It could be many, many different things. It could be my health. It could be personality things. It can be lots of different things that we come across, exams, studies, that we come across in our lives that we have to learn how to manage, because they are going to come. There's no way around that, but there is a proper way of dealing with obstacles. And so that's the main thing we'll talk about, or a spiritual message that we'll talk about. But also, I want you to also be aware of your system's not working. It's stuck on that screen. I think just use the computer on the mouse. That's okay. The other thing I want you guys to focus on as we go through the chapter is that when I was reading the fathers on this chapter, they all focused on the fact that this chapter is about baptism. It's specifically about baptism and the power of baptism. So I will put a whole bunch of quotes and things as we go, and some ideas as we go along, just about how the fathers see it, because I couldn't neglect that part of the chapter. Okay? So, Oregon says, it's on the screen, Oregon says, the events of the Jordan is a portrait of the secret that takes place in baptism. And I'm going to put a whole bunch of quotes from Oregon as we go along, because he's one of the big commentators on this chapter, and he does a lot of really nice commentary on this chapter. So you have to bear with it. If you get bored, bad luck, but I think it's good for us to read some of these quotes. Still no luck there. All right, so now let's read verses 1 to 2. So can everyone have the Bible in front of them, please? In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. Then Joshua rose early in the morning. And so now that they're at the foot of at the edge of the Jordan. Then Joshua rose early in the morning, and they set out from Acacia Grove and came to the Jordan. And he and all the children of Israel, and lodged there before they crossed over. So it was after 3 days that the officers went out through the camp. Okay, so you have this scene where they're traveling to the Promised Land, and they hit this Jordan River, and then they stop. There's an obstacle, and there's 3 days before they do anything. And so you wonder, what are they doing for these 3 days? They're sitting there for 3 days waiting to cross. And then after 3 days, the leaders come and there's a plan. There's a plan at the end of the 3 days. And the plan is specifically, as you'll see the rest of the chapter goes on, it's specifically the plan of God. That God has given them a plan that they will then implement to cross the Jordan. So when we have an obstacle or we have a problem in our lives, we shouldn't be idle. Those 3 days, they're not idle days. They're not sitting there doing nothing for those 3 days. Those are 3 days of prayer, 3 days of returning to God, asking God, what should we do? It's working now? Okay. So it's 3 days. It's not idle days. So the first step, always the first step, when you have any problem or struggle in your life, obstacle in your life, the first step is returning to God in prayer. That is a specific requirement from you to deal with your problems. We will talk later about other people that can help you, that can pray for you. But there is a requirement that you yourself turn to God with your problem. And it's a demand from God, it's expected from God, for God to answer you. There's a story later when it comes to the kings. One of the kings is sick, and the king sends to the Baals and says, to the prophets of Baal and says, am I going to get better? And on the way, the messenger's on the way to the prophets of Baal, the prophet of God comes and says, isn't there a God for you to have come and asked? Why are you asking the gods of Baal? Shouldn't you have come to me? Because you didn't, you're going to die with this illness. And so there's a requirement for us that we're not idle when it comes to our problems, even if there's nothing I can do about it. But I can pray, and I should pray, and I must pray if I want God to intervene. So those 3 days where it seems like they're just sitting there, they're not sitting there. They're waiting for the plan of God, and part of that is that you must pray. So the first step is always prayer. Also, I just put this in here that some of the fathers, when they comment on these 3 days, it's about the death and resurrection of Christ. So there's 3 days, and then they're resurrected. So you see the symbolism there. Also, they see the symbolism in 3 days, 3 in the Holy Trinity. All right, then we're going to read verse 3 to 5. And they commanded the people, saying, when you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord, your God, and the priests, the Levites bearing it, then you shall set out from your place and go after it. Yet there shall be a space between you and it, about 2,000 cubits by measure. Do not come near it, that you may know the way by which you must go, for you have not passed this way before. And Joshua said to the people, sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders amongst you. The next thing, as we wait for God, or we have a problem in our life, is that part of the invitation to God to be part of the problem or to resolve the problem for me is I have to be holy. I have to live a holy life. I can't just live how I want and then have the expectation that God is going to resolve my problems. There is a requirement that we live holy. So, and now something big is going to happen. God is going to come and intervene. It's going to be a big miracle. But part of the preparation for that is that you must sanctify yourselves. To sanctify myself means I must be holy. I must prepare myself. if there's an expectation, and by the way, when we stand in front of God, we should stand with expectation. We are children in front of the Almighty. We expect the Almighty to do something, to help me. So we stand with that feeling in front of God. But for me to stand with that feeling, I have to live a holy life, or at least trying to live a holy life. Pure lives. We cannot expect that we can just live how we want. And you'll see that the first step in that, we'll see in a minute, is the ark is the thing that goes in. What's in the ark? What's the thing that's inside the ark? Does anyone know? The ark is the one that leads the way. What's in the ark? Someone answer me. Show me that you guys are alive. The what? Yeah, I think so. Yep. But there's something really important. Kind of looks like this. Yeah, the stone tablets of the law. The law of God is in there. And so the first step, of course, is obeying the law of God. You want God to take you across the Jordan, obey the law of God. Don't think that you can create your own law and just follow whatever you feel like following. Our society tells us, obey whichever law you create as long as you harm no one. But if we want God to intervene, you obey the law of God. He's given us a law. He's given us a moral code. He's given us a way to live. So if we want God to intervene with us, then we follow His law. If you're watching the video closely, there's a really interesting part in the video where Joshua meets the angel of the Lord who represents Christ, who's Christ in the Old Testament. And in that scene, Joshua says, "Are you for us or against us, or for our enemies?" And the man answers, the commander of the Lord, I'll read it to you. He says, no, it's written on the screen. "No, but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come." He says, "No, but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come." So he says, I'm not on your side. If you're on my side, then I'll help you. Because this is my battle. God has an overarching plan that we lose sight of in our own lives. We think that as we live our own lives, is God with me? Is God supporting me? Is God looking after me? I have a conflict with someone, is God on my side? I have a problem, is God going to break down this thing and take me through to the other side? And the angel of the Lord corrects it, and he says, no, are you with me? Because if you're with me, then you do what I need you to do to win this overall battle. So he might change my direction. He might find another solution to my problem that I never predicted. In fact, he might be quite happy that my problem overcomes me in this period, because that is part of his plan. And so part of that knowing or walking that pathway with God is that I live a holy life, that I follow his commandments, that I would be sanctified. And look at the way he expects them to respect the ark. You're not allowed to go near the ark by 2,000 cubits. It's a huge distance that the people have to stay away from the ark to show the respect for the things of God, to show how holy the things of God are. So all this is done on purpose. God is trying to teach them something. He's trying to show them a pathway. So the second thing, we start with prayer. The second thing is that we also must try to live a holy life and follow the law of God, not the law of myself. Unfortunately, we too often follow the law of ourselves. The law of God, by the way, is very simple if we just read. So I told you there's going to be some long quotes from Oregon, so this is the first one. So Oregon here is talking about the people that have the luxury of being able to approach God. And it's only select people because of their holiness. So he says, finally see what he said. Let the people be at, that V shouldn't be there, be at a distance from the ark of the covenant. It says by 2,000 cubits. The priests and the Levites, however, are very near, and near enough so that the ark of the Lord and the divine law are carried on their own shoulders. Blessed are those who deserve to be very close to God. But remember that it is written, those who draw near to me draw near to fire. If you are gold and silver and have drawn near to the fire, you will shine forth more splendid and glowing because of the fire. But if you are conscious of building wood, hay, and stubble upon the foundation of your faith, and you approach the fire with such building, you will be consumed. Blessed therefore are those who are very near, who are so very near that the fire illumines and does not burn them. Nevertheless, even Israel will be saved, but it will be saved from far away, and it makes its journey not by its own power, but by the support and foresight of the priests. So Origen is saying that if you are pure, if you are like gold, you approach God, it doesn't harm you, God listens, God is with you. But if you are not holy, then it's hard to approach God. It's hard to approach God. And then Origen, like I said, Origen is a big commentator on this chapter, and it's very eloquent, the stuff that he says, so that's why I'm presenting it. But he also goes on to say that it's not just the priests or the consecrated people who are entitled to approach God. Yes, in the official way, in the liturgical way. Yes, it's only the consecrated. But in general terms, it's those who live a holy life that are able to approach God. So he says, "It is the ark of the covenant of the Lord in which the tablets of the law written by the hand of God are preserved. And everyone who is truly Israel proceeds around this ark of the covenant and is not far from it. But the Levites and priests even carry it on their shoulders. For indeed, whoever lives by a priestly religion and by holiness are themselves truly the priests and Levites of the Lord. It is not just those who seem to sit in the priestly assembly, but even more those who behave in a priestly manner. Their portion is the Lord, and they do not possess any portion on the earth. They carry the law of God on their shoulders, namely, by doing and accomplishing through their work those things that are written in the law." So again, it's back to this idea that you follow the law, you live a holy life, you get to approach God by following the law of God. Okay, so now we'll continue. We'll read a couple of verses 5 and 6. "And so Joshua said to the people, 'Sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders amongst you.' Then Joshua spoke to the priests, saying, 'Take up the ark of the covenant and cross over before the people.' So they took up the ark of the covenant and went before the people." And so again, you'll find a rule throughout the whole Bible, Old Testament and New Testament, that when God wants to deal with me, often he'll deal with me through the holy people, through the people he has chosen, he's consecrated, through the popes, the bishops, the priests, the people who are dedicated to him. And so when we have a problem, when we have an obstacle, when we have an issue, we should also, as well as praying, also ask for the guidance, ask for the prayers, ask for the counsel of the holy people. Especially when it comes to, for example, the bishops and the monks who dedicate their life to prayer. Their whole life is dedicated to prayer. And those people, they do miracles with their prayer, and God honors them not just for their character, but also for their role in his church. So St. Ambrose, this quote that I have here from St. Ambrose, he says, you don't worry yourself about the nature of the person you're dealing with. You don't worry yourself about, oh, this priest is really holy, this one is not. I'll confess to this one because he's logical, but this one's not that logical. This one's from a different generation, this one's from my generation. We don't concern ourselves too much with that because God honors the institution. God honors the system he's created. The priest is simply a witness to the work of God. So he says, do not look at worthiness of individuals. Believe that the Lord Jesus himself is present when the priest prays for the invocation of the Holy Spirit. He who says, for where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I am there in the middle of them. How much more would he grant us by the proclamation of his presence when all the congregation are there in the church and the sacraments are present? So he says that God honors the work of the priest not because of the individual. The priest will deal with God in his own way. He'll be judged in his own way. But he'll deal with the priest because of the system that God has created. So we respect the system and we respect the priests and the bishops. And we ask for their prayers and we ask for their guidance. And we should be guided by them. And so this whole chapter is led, the whole way is led by the priests. And the same is true, by the way, in the New Testament. It's not just an Old Testament idea. The New Testament is the same. St. Paul himself wasn't, he saw Christ on the road to Damascus, but he couldn't continue his service until he went to Ananias. He had to go to Ananias for Ananias to heal, to pray for him, and the scales to drop from his eyes. So it's a system God has established. Again, Origen says, if you cross over the Jordan through the priests, you will enter into the land of promise. That land where Joshua after Moses will take care of you and will be your guide in your new way. Okay, again, sticking to verses 5 and 6. Joshua tells the priests, all right, you go first, carry the ark, and the people will follow you. And I said to you before that the ark carried some key things that were representative of God amongst them. And that's why they weren't allowed to approach the ark or to touch the ark or to do anything with the ark. Only the priests were allowed to carry the ark. Because the ark represented God amongst them. And so the reason why the ark goes in first, takes the risk of going into the water and standing in the middle until they've all crossed, is symbolic of the idea that God is the one leading the way. God is the one leading the way. And so the next thing I want you guys to remember when it comes to dealing with problems in your life, obstacles in your life, and you're struggling to overcome them, that remember that God is with you in your problems. God walks first into the problem. And that's the image He's given us by coming down onto the cross. And so the image of baptism, this whole scene where they go into the water and they come out of the water alive again, is symbolic of baptism, as I said to you before. And it's the same idea that God goes in first, dies first, we die with Him, we're risen with Him. So every obstacle that you go through, God is there with you. And you have to trust that reality, that God is not neglecting the issues that you have to deal with in your life, the small and the big. He's there with you in them. He will live through them with you, and He will raise you up at the end of them. And we have to trust that, that feeling that God is there amongst us. All right, let's read verse 7 and 8. And the Lord said to Joshua, this day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that, as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. You shall command the priests who bear the ark of the covenant, saying, when you have come to the edge of the water of the Jordan, you shall stand in the Jordan. Okay. The next thing, when you come to the edge of a problem, or you're struggling to deal with something in your life, any issue you have, remember that you have to trust in God. So not only is God with you, but He's promised you that it will come good. He's promised you that everything turns to good if you pray, you seek guidance, you be holy, you do all these things. He's promised it. He starts, before He sends them in, He promises them, this day I will begin to exalt you. So you're not going to die in this river. This is not going to be the end of you. This problem that you have is not going to be the last thing you're going to deal with. I'm going to exalt you at the end of this. And you have to trust in that. Part of what's going to give you the stability to walk through all the problems you're going to deal with in your lives is the fact that you trust in God to carry you to the other side of it. If you don't trust in God, it's when you're going to start making mistakes, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But part of it is, as you go through the problem, you have to hold your integrity. You don't just weaken under the pressure of the problem. You do the wrong thing under the pressure of the problem. You have to hold that integrity, and part of that is trusting in God. Even if it's a long thing to wait for. Sometimes you have to wait a long time for the hand of God. But you have to hold on to your integrity. You have to trust in God along the way, because God's promises don't falter. Once God has promised, it is reality. It will happen. When and how, it's up to Him, but it will happen. Not like human promises. Human promises can come and go. Human promises, they change. Other things get in the way, but not with God. And later on in the chapter, again, Joshua says, He will without fail drive out before you the Canaanites. Without fail. And we have to trust in that, those promises of God. Because His promises always happen. But again, only for those who follow the pathway properly. All right, now let's read verse 9 to 11. So Joshua said to the children of Israel, come here and hear the words of the Lord your God. And Joshua said, by this you shall know that the living God is among you, and that He will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, and the Perizzites, and the Girgashites, and the Amorites, and the Jebusites. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is crossing over before you into the Jordan. Now therefore take for yourselves 12 men from the tribes of Israel, 1 man from every tribe. It shall come to pass, as soon as the soles of the feet of the priests who bear the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the Jordan, that the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off, the waters that come down from upstream, and they shall stand as a heap. So God gives an instruction. Okay? He says, this is what I would like you to do. Here's your problem. It's a big problem. You have to cross the Jordan. But this is what I would like you to do. And part of the process of trusting in God is being obedient to God. I must be obedient to God. If He's instructed you to do something, you do it. And sometimes it's general instructions. For example, if I have a financial problem and I'm stressed and I'm worried and I want to overcome my financial problem, the temptation will always be there to find a dishonest way to overcome my problem. But I must remain honest and obedient to the command of God along the way until God resolves my financial problem. The same if I have emotional problems. And sometimes the solution to my emotional problems is wrong. Substances like alcohol or other substances, or addictions or habits or anger or whatever it is. And I must remain honest to God in that problem until God resolves the problem. If I'm having relationship issues or I'm waiting for a relationship, I must be pure while I wait. Even if I have to wait a long time, I must be pure. Why? Because I have to be obedient to the command of God while I wait for Him to resolve my problem. If I wait, then God will honor me. But if I don't wait, I'll destroy myself along the way. So the obstacle becomes a real problem in my life, unfortunately. So we have to be careful of that. Joshua was obedient. He was given a specific instruction from God. You must do it this way. The priests go first. The ark goes this way. The people then have to keep this distance, and they follow. And they followed it to the T. Every instruction they followed to the T. So we have to be the same. When we are waiting for God to resolve our problems, we must be obedient until God resolves my problem. Unfortunately, many of us will lose ourselves in sin while we wait. We become too impatient, and we will destroy ourselves in sin while we wait. And it's a real problem. And then that problem becomes a much worse problem. It becomes very hard for God to resolve it because I let myself try and resolve it in another way. Oregon, he gives this analogy: the Jordan River is going down, and part of it remains as fresh water, and part of it goes into the salty Red Sea. And so he says that unfortunately some people end in the saltiness of the Red Sea. But there's others who stand fast, they stay pure, they stay sweet water that you can drink. Therefore, it seems to me that the variety of those baptized is designated in these words, a variety we ourselves, I remember with grief, often see occur. So he's talking about baptism here. Some that are baptized then go down the pathway of sin. When some who receive holy baptism surrender themselves again to the affairs of the world and to the lures of pleasure, and when they drink the salty cup of avarice, they are symbolized by that part of the waters that flows into the sea and perishes in salty billows. But the part that continues steadfast and protects its own sweetness stands for those who unchangeably hold the gift of God they have received. So unfortunately, what he's saying is there is a group that will always go down the pathway of sin when they face problems. But we shouldn't be that group. We should be honest. We should remain steadfast and obey the command of God while we wait. Now we'll read verse 14 to 17. I think we're almost finished. So it was, when the people set out from their camps to cross over the Jordan, with the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people. And as those who bore the ark came to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests who bore the ark dipped in the edge of the water, for the Jordan overflows all its banks during the whole time of harvest, that the waters which came down from upstream stood still and rose in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that is beside Zaratan. So the waters that went down into the sea of the Arabah, the salt sea, failed and were cut off, and the people crossed over opposite Jericho. Then the priests who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground, in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel crossed over on dry ground until all the people had crossed completely over the Jordan. And so the last thing to remember is that when you are honest to God along the pathway of problems, the end result is always glory. It's always a chance for you to see the hand of God. Always. It's never not a chance for you. That in the end, God will show his hand and you will sit back and watch. I heard one priest say, when you look at the work of God in your life, it's like a chess player, a master chess player, and you have no idea why they're putting the pieces where they're putting them. And when you're an amateur, you're putting your pieces everywhere thinking that you're going to win the game, and suddenly the whole thing makes sense. And you're destroyed by this master chess player. That's the way God functions. He moves pieces, and suddenly you see the hand of God. And that is the glory of God. And that moment is when you sit back and you just observe. You enjoy the glory of God. But it comes sometimes with patience. And everyone around you will see it too. It's not just you. The glory of God, when it works in your life, it works for the sake of everyone, not just for you. And so he says, and by this you shall know that the living God is among you. By this all of you will know it. All of you will know it. So you just wait on God and watch in awe as he resolves the problems that you have in your life. The other side is always glorious with God. The other side is always for your good. It's never not for your good. Trust in that, and you'll be able to overcome all the little and big problems that you face in your life. Oregon, again, I think there's one last quote. He says that these people, as they crossed the Jordan, was a huge miracle. But in fact, this miracle is happening amongst Christians all the time. Those people who hold to the faith. But in general terms, these miracles are happening all the time. He says, and do not imagine that these deeds are only in former times, and nothing so great as this is brought forth in you who are now the hearer of them. For all things are fulfilled in you according to a mystical reckoning. Indeed, you who long to draw near to the hearing of the divine law have recently forsaken the darkness of idolatry and are now for the first time forsaking Egypt. When you are reckoned among the number of catechumens and have undertaken to submit to the precepts of the church, you have parted the Red Sea and placed in the stations of the desert you daily devote yourself to hearing the law of God and to looking upon the face of Moses, through which the glory of the Lord is revealed. But if you also have entered the mystic font of baptism in the presence of the priestly and Levitical order, have been instructed by those venerable and magnificent sacraments which are known to those who are permitted to know those things, then with the Jordan parted, you will enter the land of promise by the services of the priests. In this land, Jesus receives you after Moses and becomes for you the leader of a new way. So he's saying it's a miracle that people will hold fast to God. It's a miracle, and it's a bigger miracle than even that. And that's true, especially for young people that live pure in our world. I'll tell you, the pathway to sainthood amongst us is purity in the world we live in. Honesty through some of the things that we are attacked with in our culture. Sexual purity, alcohol, certain moral choices we make. To hold fast in our society makes us saints. And that's what he's saying there. The final thing, I will finish, I think, with this. The final thing is that in the following chapter, which we're not going to read, you'll go through it next week, he makes them pick up stones from the middle of the Jordan. Oh, by the way, I didn't mention that when he resolves the problem, by the way, look at the language that he's used, that they're standing on dry ground, so he's stopped the water from flowing. The ground is not even wet. The ground is dry. That all of them, he says, when they crossed completely over the Jordan. So when God does finally resolve your problem, he resolves it completely, in excess, beyond what you ever imagined. That's how God resolves the problem. That's why I say it's always for glory. Then he gets them to take stones and put them as a memorial. And so one thing as a lesson is, and they do it always through the Old Testament, is they make a memorial when God worked in their lives and did something miraculous for them. And so we should have this habit. When God resolves a problem for me, I make a record of it somehow, so that when I face my next problem, I always look back as a memorial. God didn't let me down. This next problem is not as big as the last problem. and God did not let me down. Why should He let me down now? So it gives you more hope, more faith, more trust as you progress through life. It's a journey that we're all taking, but we have to be growing. I remember once I was sitting with Father Mina, and there was an issue that I was, worried about, and many times now he's so confident that the thing will resolve before I have to wait and watch and see, because I get worried, and then it resolves in front of me. And one time I said, how come he's so confident, and he said, look, I've lived through a lot. I've seen a lot. I've had a lot of problems in my life. And God never, ever let me down. So I've gotten to the point now where I worry about nothing. Nothing worries me because God never let me down. So that idea that God has these landmarks in your life, sometimes big problems, but He resolves them for you, you remember them. You have to remember Him so that when you go through the next problem, that you can count on that no, He never lets me down, and He will not let me down. And why should this be the thing that He lets me down in when He's never let me down before? So always remember the work of God in your own life. Glory be to God forever. Amen. Thank you for listening to me. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask now. Otherwise, we'll call it a night. Thank you.